Hello and welcome to the Warcraft Academy guide to playing an Arcane Mage in patch 5.4. This guide was created by Psychobi, an Arcane Mage from Scrubbusters with an impressive number of high-ranking DPS passes. This guide is going to cover the basic aspects of the rotation, as well as some more advanced tips, and later talk about stats and character customization. Use the menu at the top of the screen to skip between sections as you need to. First of all, let's quickly run over the rotation and how it works and what each of your spells do. The Arcane rotation revolves around building up stacks of Arcane Charge by using Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles, and then consuming those charges with Arcane Barrage to deal bonus damage. Arcane Blast is your main way to generate Arcane Charges. It has a short cast time and generates one Arcane Charge with each cast. For each Arcane Charge you currently have, Arcane Blast will do 50% more damage and cost 150% more mana. Arcane Missiles also generates Arcane Charges, but it's channeled and can only be used when you get an Arcane Missiles proc. You can get this proc randomly from any damaging spell. Arcane Barrage will consume all of your current Arcane Charges when used, and deal 50% extra damage per stack. In addition, it'll also hit an extra target for each charge you have, up to a maximum of 5. Your rotation also involves 3 cooldowns that affect the rotation. Arcane Power and Mirror Images are flat damage cooldowns that should be used as soon as they're available each time, although sync them with other cooldowns when they're available. Alter Time is your more interesting cooldown. When you use Alter Time, it takes a snapshot of your current stats, including your buffs, mana and Arcane Charges, and when you cast it again, or after 6 seconds, it resets you back to that snapshot. This means you can use this time to spend all of your Arcane Charges, and when it ends you'll have them all back to spend again. Something important to remember about Alter Time is that it will also snapshot your positioning, so always be careful when using it. The final 2 components of your rotation are actually talents which are considered mandatory. Rune of Power is a required part of your rotation that puts a Rune of Power on the ground. When you stand in it, you do 15% extra damage and your mana regenerates 75% faster. You can have 2 Runes of Power up at once and they last for a minute each. This is very important for keeping your mana high and maximizing your damage. The other one is either Nether Tempest or Living Bomb. Living Bomb does damage over 12 seconds to a target and explodes for extra damage to everything around it when it expires. This can only be applied to 3 targets. Nether Tempest does slightly less damage over 12 seconds, but each time it does damage, it also does half of that damage to a target within 10 yards. So you know what all of your spells do, here's how to use them correctly. Your first priority is keeping up Rune of Power at all times and ensuring that you stand in it. During high movement encounters you may have to recast this fairly often, but it's always the best talent to take. Try to minimize your movement as much as possible so that you don't have to move out of this. Next, keep either Living Bomb or Nether Tempest applied to the target depending on which one you're using. Living Bomb is better for single target or for mass AoE situations, and Nether Tempest is better for multi-target. You should use Arcane Power and Mirror Images both on cooldown, but sync them together with Alter Time whenever possible. Alter Time should be used on cooldown, but only when you have 4 stacks of Arcane Charge and 2 stacks of Arcane Missiles. This is to ensure that you get full benefit from Alter Time. Once you've activated Alter Time, you follow a specialized rotation for a few seconds. First, use Arcane Missiles and then Arcane Blast, then Arcane Missiles and Arcane Blast again. Finally, finish up with an Arcane Barrage. As soon as the Alter Time ends, you'll immediately have all of those Arcane Charges and Arcane Missiles back. Outside of Alter Time, use Arcane Blast to build up your Arcane Charge stacks, and when you get Arcane Missiles procs, you ideally want to use them with 4 Arcane Charges to maximize the damage they do, but if you get 2 Arcane Missiles procs up at once, you should use one even if you're not at 4 charges. Otherwise, you're wasting potential procs since you can't have more than 2. Finally, when you have no Arcane Missiles procs and you're at 4 Arcane Charges, use Arcane Barrage to consume the charges and begin stacking them up again. Now if you're playing with the tier 16 2-set bonus, you need to change your rotation slightly. You'll gain a stack of Profound Magic whenever you cast Arcane Missiles. Profound Magic is a buff on yourself that stacks up to 4 times, and it reduces the mana cost of your next Arcane Blast by 25% per stack. When playing with this, all you need to do is ensure that you use up your Profound Magic stacks before you use Arcane Barrage. Basically, if you're at 4 stacks of Arcane Charge and you have Profound Magic, use one extra Arcane Blast before you do your Arcane Barrage. So with all that information in mind, here's how to open up in an encounter. First, use Rune of Power just as you're getting ready to pull. Next, use Mirror Images around 3 seconds before the boss is pulled, and a Potion of the Jade Serpent immediately after. Start casting an Arcane Blast that's timed to finish casting just as the boss is pulled. As soon as the boss is pulled, apply Living Bomb or Nether Tempest. Begin casting Arcane Blast until you get up to 4 stacks of Arcane Charge. As soon as you do, activate Arcane Power, along with any intellect or stat procs you might have, such as Berserking or Synapse Springs. Activate Alter Time next, and then use Arcane Missiles, Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, and a final Arcane Blast. When you've done this, finish with an Arcane Barrage just before Alter Time expires. If you have super low haste, you might struggle to fit all these casts in. If that's the case, do one less Arcane Blast. After Alter Time, you can then use your Arcane Missiles procs and use an Arcane Barrage. From here, just continue building Arcane Charges and consuming them when appropriate. Build up to 4, consume your Arcane Missiles, then Arcane Barrage. One other thing to think about is your mana management. As an Arcane Mage, you deal more damage the more mana you have thanks to your Mastery. This is why it's so important to use Rune of Power for the regeneration. In situations where your mana starts to get low, you can weave in Arcane Missiles casts early, or use Arcane Barrage at less than 4 stacks. You should also make sure to conjure a mana gem before combat and use it on cooldown to keep your mana high. Against 2 or 3 targets, take Nether Tempest as a talent and apply it to all targets, and then maintain your single target rotation on the most important target. This assumes that the targets are in range for Nether Tempest to cleave. However, if the targets are dying frequently and they aren't up for long periods, it's not worth the global to apply Nether Tempest, so Living Bomb would be a better choice. Against 5 or more targets, if it's a mass AoE situation, you should actually take Living Bomb, since the explosion damage results in fewer globals spent applying the dot and should be similar in damage. If you can get into melee range, use Improved Cone of Cold and spam Arcane Explosion. If you can't get into melee range, use Flame Strike and Blizzard instead. If it's not really a full AoE scenario, continue using Nether Tempest instead of Living Bomb. Overall, you really need to manage your Arcane Charges, your Arcane Missiles, and your Profound Magic stacks properly. You'll find it very helpful to use an add-on such as Weak Auras to display your stacks of these buffs in an easy to view area of your screen. This should make it a lot easier to keep track of these buffs. So onto your character development choices. As an Arcane Mage, Intellect is your best stat at a 1-to-1 ratio. After that, you need to be hit capped so that none of your spells miss, which is equal to 15% hit chance or 5100 rating. Next, Mastery is your most important stat. This is what causes your damage to increase based upon how much mana you have, so the more mana you have, the more damage you do. On single target, Mastery and Haste are approximately equal to each other, but Mastery becomes outright better in any other situation. As a result, these are the gems you should be looking to socket. In red slots, the best gem to use is the Keen Vermilion Onyx, since expertise directly goes towards spell hit. This allows you to reforge out of any hit on your gear into more mastery elsewhere. Once you get over the hit cap and can't reforge any lower, start using the intellect mastery gems here instead. In yellow slots, use pure mastery gems, and in blue slots, use hit mastery gems. Once you get over the hit cap, you can use stamina mastery gems in blue slots instead. This won't give you extra DPS, but since the hit will be wasted anyway, you might as well gain some extra survivability. Likewise, these are the best enchants you can choose as an Arcane Mage, following the same stat priority. Concerning your professions, the best two are Engineering and Tailoring. However, you can use any of these on-screen professions, which are all very close in terms of DPS. For glyphs, there are 6 main ones you can choose from, and you should consider switching these around based on the requirements of each specific encounter. Glyph of Arcane Power will make your Arcane Power last longer, but it has a longer cooldown. This causes it to line up better with your other cooldowns and results in stronger burst and overall damage. Glyph of Arcane Explosion can be useful during movement due to its longer range. When you use Arcane Explosion, it refreshes the duration of your arcane charges, so extra range on that increases the chance of you hitting something to refresh them. Glyph of Cone of Cold directly increases the damage it does and is mandatory for AoE if you're in melee range. Glyph of Mana Gem increases the number of charges your mana gems contain, allowing you to use it more times in longer fights. Glyph of Loose Mana is a minor glyph, and it makes your mana gem restore the mana over time. Since this makes the mana gem a short buff on yourself, you can use it just before you alter time, and you'll end up with twice the mana return as a result. This means this glyph is mandatory. Next, your talent choices. Now each tier may have talents that are useful in specific situations, whereas some may have one mandatory talent. In the first tier, you can choose between Blazing Speed or Ice Flows. Both are perfectly viable, it depends heavily on your personal preference as to which one you use. In the second tier, Temporal Shield is the best defensive tool hands down. The other two talents are similar, but just plain inferior in comparison. In the third tier, Ring of Frost is a good default talent to go to, since a few creative raid strategies can make use of it, but occasionally you may find use for the stun from the Frostjaw Deep Freeze combo instead. In the fourth tier, you can choose between Cauterize or Greater Invisibility. Cauterize provides a nice safety net if you make a mistake, whereas Greater Invisibility is a stronger defensive cooldown as long as you can use it in advance. In the fifth tier, you choose between Nether Tempest or Living Bomb. We've talked a bit about this before, but generally you want to take Living Bomb for single target, for AoE, or for fights where the targets are spread far apart, and Nether Tempest for fights where the mobs are close enough to cleave. Finally, in tier 6, you always take Rune of Power. The mana regeneration combined with the damage increase makes it the best talent hands down even on high movement encounters. And finally, your gear decisions. You should select gear based on it having your key stats, Mastery and Haste, and the gear on screen now shouldn't completely decide what gear you pick up, but it is a good starting point to aim for. In terms of trinkets, the Immersius Trinket and Cardress's Toxic Totem are great for Arcane and should be the ones you go for, but the Garrosh Trinket is also very decent and is a viable alternative if you can't get them. Thanks very much for watching this guide. If you have any comments or suggestions, post them below or email us, and if you're interested in being coached by a top Arcane Mage, click on screen for more information.